So we are going to go ahead and start building. And the first thing we need to do to start building is put this drawing onto our material. And for this demonstration, instead of building it on crescent board, which is the material I built the last demonstration out of and there are already videos on, I'm going to build this at a chipboard, which is the super cheap cardboard looking board. And therefore we're going to have to base it and prime it a little bit more when we're done. But I'm going to go ahead and build it out of this. It's still 1/16 of an inch thick, so it's still the same 1 tick thickness measurement on our corkback ruler, so it's not going to be any different math wise from what you're doing. So the first thing we need to do is to get it on this material so that we can start cutting it out. And so we have a couple options when it comes to getting this onto this. And I have here the printouts of the items that I gave you guys, and you can just trace these onto the item with a couple different kinds of transfer paper. And the one that I'm talking about most significantly is going to be this graphite paper. And this graphite paper has graphite on one side, and that's the shiny side. So whenever you place this shiny side down, you're able to use pressure to transfer the drawing onto another sheet of paper. And what I'm going to go ahead and do is pull out this sheet right here, which has the door, and this has some of the largest number of lines that we want to translate, and is where we can go ahead and start building. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and cut off this edge before I trace it on this hard side here. And this is the side of this, what will be the side of this piece of paper, and this one will be the top edge. So I want to go ahead and cut those flush and cut the rest out roughly. It doesn't really matter if I cut it out exactly or not. Set the other part aside. And now I'm going to take a little bit of tape and I am going to place this very carefully on the edge, on the manufacturer's edge on the corner, exactly the height and shape that I want it to be. And I'm putting it all the way onto the edge because that way I don't actually have to cut that last edge. I can use the factory edge to help me out. What I want to do is keep it very secure and wrap that tape around. So now I can't move. And I know it's where it wants to be. So this right here, if I put the shiny side down, I'll be able to take any sharp implement and trace it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to trace along the bottom line of the molding because we're going to have to place that molding there. I'm going to trace the bottom line of this molding right here. And I'm going to trace now. I do want to trace the window because I'm going to cut the window out, but I don't need to trace any of the molding around the door of the window because I'm going to add that on top. I traced this piece and this piece because I need a reference of where I'm going to be setting those on top pieces of molding, but I don't need anything else to cut it out. So once I remove this and I take the tape off, I'm technically done with this piece of paper now. I don't need it anymore. Now you get this lovely image of that piece. And now I can cut this out. So if you are thinking to yourself, well, that was quick. It is quick and it is easy to do, but so is measuring and cutting things out. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut this all the way out, all the way across. And what this is going to mean is that I'm going to have the rest of the sheet already at the same height as this wall, which may or may not be useful, but we will see. But generally what I'd be doing is I would cut that whole piece out at the right height for this wall, and then I would measure out exactly how wide this wall is. And in scale, it's going to be less than 8 feet, because 8 feet by 8 feet is how big the platform is. So this platform is 8 feet, and this is 1 foot, and it's 1 inch in. So I can do the math on that, obviously. So if it's not 8 feet, it's 7 feet. It's 1 inch shy of 7 feet. So this right here in 1/2 inch scale should be 6'11", which it is. And then the same up here, 6'11". There it is, 6'11". So I know that this line is straight and I can cut it. Now, I double checked with math and measurements, but the print is going to be a correct representation. And so you can, once you already have that, you can use it to cut things out. But these two pieces aren't going to have, I'm not going to have anything to worry about as far as the math involved with taking away thickness. So these guys here, I want to make sure they're square because something feels very unsquare. I don't know if you can see that, but they're just a little bit unsquare. Just a little bit, just a tiny bit unsquare. So you want to be very careful when you are tracing, because if you get a little bit off, it could look quite a bit off when you're done. So I'm going to be very careful in this door to not lose any of the pieces. The window I can be less careful in. The door, I'm going to want to keep that piece. So in order to get these corners cut really nice and tight, you want to take your knife and come in and press up into that corner and then drag down. Press up into that corner and then drag down. And this is loose. For my top edge, again, I want to protect my door because I'm going to reuse it. So I'm going to come in and push into that corner. And then I'm going to pull into about halfway through that door. And I can feel that I'm all the way through the material. So I'm going to flip it over to the other side, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to cut into the corner, deep into the corner, and pull towards myself, and that'll allow me to pull that free. So I'm going to do the same thing with this window, but this time with the window, I don't particularly care if I damage the interior of the window itself. So I'm just worried about the outside edge, which means I'm going to try and keep my ruler straight across each outside edge. I can come all the way around, kind of 360, and just carefully cut. I'm gonna use my knife to come in and just finish off what's on the underside of this window, just in the corners. It's just slightly attached. You can see right there. So I can feel that in the blade and come through and just gently use the tip of my blade to pull that out. And I could feel that that was still there before I removed it. So technically we have 2 walls, rock and roll and ready to go. So what are we going to do? So the next thing we need to do is our next few pieces we're going to have to start accommodating for the width of the material. So I'll show you that in a little bit. But for these individual walls or any of your walls, once you know that they're the right size and cut out, you need to start creating the support pieces for the backside. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to line it up to my mat so it's nice and even, and I know that's 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm going to get to cutting some support pieces. And these ones are going to be nice and even and correct. And I know they're going to be correct because I'm lining them up carefully. And their height is going to be correct because I cut them off the same slice as the original piece I cut. So instead of cutting a lot of extra material, I'll just use the cutoff of that long slice for my stuff. Now, this material comes in smaller sheets, which is probably how some of you have purchased your crescent board and your map board as well. So you will need multiple sheets for this project. So that also means that this right here is smaller than 8 foot by 8 foot, which is the amount that I would need in scale. 0 to is not smaller than 8 foot by 8 foot. Look at that. Oh, because the wall is taller than it is wide. So because I still have room for an 8 foot by 8 foot, I can also get the platform out of this piece. So you can be as economical as possible. And to do that, you want to cut your biggest pieces out first. So these are some of my biggest pieces, the wall pieces. And you might think that your archway is a big piece as well, but it's actually pretty small. You're going to create the post and the interior piece. So that one's really pretty small. The next biggest pieces are going to be your platform and your staircase. So we're going to cut those out next. But instead of transferring, I'm going to measure because I know how big my platform is. My platform is 8 feet by 8 feet. So right here, this platform here is 8 feet by 8 feet. And instead of trying to transfer this big, very easy to measure square, I'm just going to measure a square. So to do that, I'm going to come in with a mark and I'm going to go, this is in 1/2 inch scale. Every 1/2 inch is a foot. So 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot, 7 foot, 8 foot. So that mark is going to get me a straight line. And then over here, same thing, 2, 4, 6, 8 feet. So I'm going to go right here and right here. Now, one of the things I also know is that I'm going to need a step right here. So that's 1 foot by 8 foot. So I'm going to come down and say, all right, 4 by 4 inches is 8 by 8. So this is going to be an 8 inch cut, and then I'm going to just make another mark on this grid at 1 foot in scale, or half a real inch. And I'm going to go ahead and draw that line. And I'm going to do the same right here, and then I'm going to connect these 2 lines right here. Now I don't actually have to draw these lines all the way out if I can remember where my marks were, but they were kind of small. But this is the platform and this is the stair. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. So these extra little bits here and this extra little bit here I might need. So I'm not going to throw them out. And I'm going to kind of keep in mind of where they are. So this piece right here, I'm going to cut it nice and neat at 8 feet. And then these ones right here, I'm going to cut nice and neat at 8 feet again. That makes a nice 8 by 8 foot platform and an 8 by 8 foot stair. By doing these second cuts off the offcut of my first ones, I make it so I don't have to keep remeasuring the same 8 feet in scale over and over again. And especially because all of these measurements are even numbers, they're a lot easier. So I'm going to set that off to the side for the platform and the step. And here are some support pieces for my front door. And I'm going to show you one more method of transfer before we move on, and that one is gluing. So if you have a piece that you want to cut out, but it's pretty complicated, like this right here, what you can do is, instead of transferring it on, or instead of laying it out and drawing it, you can spray adhere it. So you can use a product, a spray adhesive product called Super 77, and it is a very sticky spray, and it will allow you to spray right on here. Now when you do that, you have two choices. You can either spray it very lightly so that it lightly sticks down and tacks down, and you can cut it out and then peel it off when you're done. Or you can spray it here really well so that it doesn't come off. Those are your two choices. I'm going to go take this outside to spray Super 77 because you do not want to spray anything inside that'll be toxic. 1 second. All right, I'm back. So when you go to spray the piece of staircase, one of the things you want to remember is not to overspray onto anything else that you've got out there. I like to spray into a cardboard box so that any overspray stays very contained and I don't get anything messy or sticky. This is going to tend to make the rest of your item pretty sticky. So you could do the paper instead of the material. Make a choice on what you think, what you have the most area for, and what you're going to want to save or what you're going to want to reuse. I will say that you may bring this back and be like, yes, cutting, done. And it may seem like the most perfect option right off the bat, but I will say that don't be too hasty. Not only does it leave some residue, but it does become a little bit more difficult to cut out because you do still have to take into consideration the thickness of your material. What do I mean by that? I mean the same way that we built this box earlier, that if you have two pieces next to each other, one of them has to take the thickness. So this piece right here may be 2 by 2 inches, but this one right here is not 2 by 2 inches. And we have to take all of the thickness of the materials next to it into consideration when we make this box. Otherwise, we're going to get a box that's not the right size. So if we want our staircase to be accurate and the right size, this exact size that I have printed out is what the finished edge would look like if it were painted and finished and perfect. But that isn't what the finished edge actually kind of looks like for us at this moment. What I mean by that is that we have to take the thickness of the material into account. And another thing I gave you as a clue as to how I would like you to create this is I have these little extra bits here popping out. And the easiest way to do that is, instead of making the run of or the tread of your staircase where you actually walk on, instead of making that even with the staircase, I gave it a little bump out. And so you should make each one of your treads a little bit larger. And when you cut those out, they'll fit right on there. So the side piece should be short on this long side and on each tread. So that means I'm going to need to cut off one tick or one thickness from here, 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 and here. You want to be careful that you don't forget where you're cutting the thickness off of, because surely that can happen. But what this will mean is that all of my top pieces are the same width, and that they'll also be overlapping with these side pieces. So when I make my measurement to cut these out, I want to be very careful to mark one tick, and I want to put a mark on both sides. That will allow me to make a nice clean cut. You want to mark carefully and deliberately on each one. And you could do this on both, but what I will probably do is go ahead and just use one side to cut out the next side, because they should be exact mirror opposites of each other. So now I'm going to do my shortcuts, and I'm actually going to do all my shortcuts first. I'm going to line this up real carefully, and I'm going to do a shortcut all the way through this material, all the way through there. And now these shortcuts I'm going to do this way, and I'm not going to cut all the way through in the sense that I'm going to create a free piece. I'm going to dig my point into these corners and pull toward me. I'm going to do it again one more time, and I can feel that I'm all the way through. And you can see back here that there's a kind of shiny line. That is where I'm all the way through that material. So I'm going to do it again over here. I'm going to, oh, you know what? I need to go farther than the corner. I need to go to this corner right here. Press and pull, press and pull, press and pull. One more time here. Press and pull, and through. Press and pull, I'm through. Over here, I'm going to cut to the edge. Now I'm going to cut these long ones. Now the reason I did that is that it's much easier to cut those short bursts when your piece is a lot bigger. As soon as you cut it down into this smaller slice, it's going to be harder to make those cuts. So now I'm going to come in and push into that corner and pull. And once again, I'm cutting along the reduced edge. I'm cutting along the piece that will be one thickness down. Now I could certainly do this the other way, in particular. Because I want to keep this side of the piece rather than the other side. But if I do that, I'm cutting in toward the corner like this. And getting a nice clean cut up into that corner can be very difficult. You can see I get a little bit of an overshoot right there. It's not impossible to make the cut. It just can be difficult to make that cut cleanly into the corner instead of out of it. So I will come back, make this last cut here. And now I have this piece. If I turn around and place it on here, you can see that I'm going to be able to put the tops of each tread where they need to go and have everything else fit accordingly. So once I have this piece to take up that extra space, it's gonna fit perfectly. So I'm gonna go ahead and trace this and make a new cut. So anytime I need to duplicate a piece, I don't necessarily need to start over. Yeah, I don't have any pieces out that will do. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go ahead and trace this, and I'm gonna sharpen my pencil and then cut it out again, and then I'll be right back. I feel like they are not. I feel like I am wrong, and they are. Okay. So they are as close as they can get, I think. They're just hard to hold at the same time. It's a little slippery. So now I have a choice with this paper. I can either leave it on or I can peel it off. And I might have to leave it on. Yeah, that stick is pretty sticky. And that's going to leave a pretty bad residue. So when I glue this together, I'm going to glue it toward the inside. One of the things you want to remember is if it's not really well glued, you want to peel it off. And the reason that is if I glue a whole bunch of stuff to this, and then this eventually peels off, it doesn't matter that I glued these two things together very well. If the paper comes off, I've only glued this to the paper, and the paper will release, and my model piece will fall apart. And the other part is that it might not paint very well. Yeah, so if you've just printed these out on regular printer paper, it's probably not going to take paint super well, and so you probably don't want to leave that adhered. All right, next we're going to cut out the treads, the tops, and the treads to the staircase and glue them together. And we're going to do that by measuring. So we know how wide this thing is going to be from the drafting right here. So we know how wide this is going to be, how wide the staircase is going to be. And in 1/2 inch scale, it's going to be a nice even 4 feet, which is in real life 2 inches. So 4 feet in scale. Now verify that for you. 4 feet in scale is 2 inches. So I'm going to make that second mark again. I'll carefully line that up. Make that second mark in a less cavalier manner. Okay. Now I'm going to grab that large cork back ruler again, and I'm going to cut this in a nice large slice. And the reason that is I'm going to cut all of the treads and the risers out of this piece. So first, I'm going to cut the pieces that cover the whole distance. And by that, I mean I'm going to cover the piece that is the square for the top and the rungs. And remember, I want this to be just a little bit bigger than what it needs to be. So I want to add just a little bit more here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a convenient thickness, which is going to be a tick, I think. Yeah. So I'm going to cut it from this side, and I'm going to line my clear ruler up to be exactly 2 inches plus a little. And then I'm going to make a nice channel to cut the rest out. And so now I can use that channel as a mark for my cork back ruler. And the reason I did that is because it was sliding around a little bit. Again, I think that is because I don't have a good vantage point. A good way to push this down. So this next part, for each step, I'm going to do a foot and a little. To get the next measurement, I'm going to add the two together and continue down the line. So it should be a total of 2 feet and 2 littles, if you will. So now I'm going to go with foot and a tick, foot and a tick. And I'm going to need a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 treads, and the top piece I've already cut, and there it is. So it's 1, 2, 3, and then 4. So now that I have those marks, I'm going to come in with the corkback ruler, which I can hold down real tight, and cut pretty quickly. Now, I do feel like I'm getting a lot of resistance from cutting, and that I might need to go ahead and change out my blade. And I know that because not just that it's taking me a few cuts to get through this material. It's not really taking me that many. 3 is not bad, right? But it's getting a little bit harder to push, and I'm tempted to push harder. So if I'm tempted to push harder, I may want to consider not pushing harder, but instead changing my blade. I am going to go ahead and snap my blade off so that I get a sharper tip. And then now, if this piece goes on top here, the piece that goes in the middle needs to be narrower. It needs to be 2 widths of material narrower than what goes on top. So that would be 2 ticks. So I'm going to go ahead and take this piece and remove 2 ticks from it. And the width of it. Oh yeah, that's much better. It's that brand new tip you see. I did 2 very easy passes and got all the way through. So now I have a little bit of a dilemma. So I'm actually not going to cut this piece yet, because sometimes instead of doing complex math, you just want to put something together and figure it out. And by that, I mean there really isn't much of a need to do that math right now. I am going to cut off one piece that's kind of an arbitrary size. And that piece I'm going to use to keep my back sides together. So for the top, I'm going to start by gluing this one top piece together. And I'm going to glue that. And that is not right. This piece is not quite square. It's a little longer in this direction than it is in this direction. So when I lined it up and it was perfect, I knew that was wrong, because I want that little overhang to make it feel like a staircase. So I can continue to hold this, or my hot glue gun is hot. I'm going to come in here, just give it a quick little tack of hot glue and let it cool. And then this next piece, I'm going to do the same thing. And I said I would put this on the inside, but I did mess up. But that's okay. I'm just going to put it on this side. No harm, no foul, no big deal. But I don't want to wait until the glue is set before I do that, because once you have a really set piece, it can be hard to get to undo. The other thing is that once I put that hot glue on there, it's making it very difficult to get those pieces really next to each other. So I'm going to go ahead and hot glue that whole piece, but I need to heat it up and get it really smooth by using the nose of my piece. And then line it up, push it together. So to keep that hot glue joint secure and really clean, I'm going to reinforce it with some hot glue on the inside. Now I need to hold it for a second, because by reapplying hot glue to that joint, I've made the exterior part hot again, because heat transfers. So it's going to get weak again. So I need to hold it and hold it square for just a few more seconds until that hot glue dries. But that's one way that you can get a nice, clean hot glue joint. So I'm gonna come over here. I've got some nice glue on that joint. And now I'm gonna place this here. I just cleaned off some of the hot glue so that it wouldn't look weird on the outside edge. Smooth out, squeeze out. And now I'm gonna just do a little dab of hot glue there. Keep this guy in there. So when I said that I cut this piece out just at an arbitrary height, it's an arbitrary height, but not an arbitrary width. You can see right here that this width is exactly between these two. And so I'm going to use this as a spacer to keep this bottom side an adequate distance apart. This is just essentially just a support structure, something to help these pieces stay where I would like them to be. So this isn't, its placement is also relatively arbitrary. Just gonna give it a nice little dollop of hot glue there. And that will prevent it from moving around and going on vacation, etc. So once I have that, this guy becomes pretty secure. And I can go ahead and take glue and put it on each one of these. And then take these pieces and slide them right into that corner. I want them to be even on the outside edges. So I do want to coax them into the same width as they should be. And not have too much squeeze out. Now if your staircase gets any wider, I put a little pressure on that just to get it to stick down. It's bubbling a little bit. Now if you get any wider than this, you want to be careful that you still have support in the middle. Now this has 2 inches, 2 real inches across, which is about how much we need to prevent it from warping. If you need to do a staircase like this that's really wide and you need to put a center support in there, you don't necessarily need one as long as your treads are close together. It's this platform up here, you're gonna need that center support. Because what we're gonna do is now that we have our overhangs, we're gonna go ahead and drop our rises into each one of these. And the reason I said that we're gonna go ahead and wait is because this bottom one is really important. This bottom one needs to be the size that it actually is. This bottom one, and you can use a scale ruler or you can use your cork back ruler and you can look at it and see that it's about 4 ticks. 3.5. It's really 3.5 ticks. That's what it is, which is a weird number to be, but we don't judge. So it's gonna be, your bottom one is gonna be that size, but everything else is not gonna need to be exactly that size. So your bottom one is exactly the size you need it to be, and all your other ones, you need it to be square, so use your square, but it actually can be anything over that size. So we're gonna go massively oversized. We're gonna go for 1 foot in scale or 1/2 inch, just because it's an easy thing to see and cut on this cutting mat. And we're gonna need 1, 2, 3, 4 of them. So that's 3, 1 more will make 4. As we're waiting to cut these pieces out also, this gives our staircase a little bit of time to dry. So this is getting a little bit tackier as we work on stuff. I'm going to grab a pair of tweezers because our next action, if I have my fingers in there, might be a little bit harder for you to see. So I'm going to put my fingers here just to support, because these aren't dry yet. I don't want those staircases to fall out in my hand. And I'm going to take this and I'm going to put a little bit of glue right here, and then straight across. And this is what I was talking about if you don't glue the paper on really well. All I'm gluing to is the paper. All I'm gluing to right here is the paper. So if this doesn't quite fit the way I want it to, we could have a problem. So I'm going to come in and push that in. And something is a little wonky. There we go. Oop. There we go. All right. That should keep it in line. Okay. Now the other ones, I'm going to go ahead and hold them in the tweezers and then apply glue onto 3 sides and then place them into the opening. So from the back side, I'm going to slide this down and place it into this edge. Now if you want to close this gap with a little glue as well, you can. And whoop. And if you make these pieces a little bit bigger, like I've made them quote unquote grossly oversized, what that does is it gives you a little bit more leverage to be able to hold on and push these pieces in. I want to look at it from this angle as well and make sure that I'm pressed in right here. This edge right here has a tendency to have a gap in it if you're not careful, and it will be much weaker if you try and leave that just there. It'll be much weaker. So I'm gonna glue and place all of these pieces into the staircase. And I will have a completed staircase bottom, so I need to do our handrails and windows, but I'll get to the details in just a bit. But this can be a much faster and easier placement. Intricately colored each individual piece, just like actual scenery, making in mind that anything you don't see, you don't have to worry about. Don't forget to flip this up and make sure that you're all the way against the staircase. These pieces are providing extra depth to the staircase. Only thing, I'm gonna just dry fit this one right here because it's a little too big. Do you see that right there? I'm gonna have to trim it just a little bit so that it won't poke up. So I'll trim that and then adhere it, and we can move on to some of our other walls and platforms that we need to account for thickness and make structural adjustments to. So we'll glue that right in there. We'll add a little bit of glue here and double check that it's nice and tight. And we'll set that aside to dry before we come back